We have all heard stories of strange sightings of even stranger beasts. I remember a very credible witness telling me just such a tale on the banks of Loch Ness. Great stories, doubtless, but is there any veracity to them? Could it be that lurking in the shadows is a whole army of creatures we have yet to discover? Well, we're about to meet a man who claims to have evidence to support such fantastic claims. Better stay tuned to Things Visible and Invisible. Jason Offutt teaches journalism at Northwest Missouri State University. He's the author of 5 books on the paranormal, including such titles as Haunted Missouri and Chasing America's Monsters. In addition, he also writes novels. And he's been interviewed on many, many podcasts and radio shows, including the legendary Coast to Coast AM. And he joins me down the line from his home in Missouri. Jason, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you very much. This is going to be fun.
Jason, the whole subject of cryptozoology, for those not in the know, it's a subject where people sort of scratch their head and say, really? Chasing Americans' monsters? Are there such creatures running around on the streets of modern America?
Well, considering that my first book on cryptozoology, Chasing American Monsters, as you've mentioned, I found 250 beasts that are unknown in the United States. And the follow-up book, Chasing North American Monsters, I found more. And also monsters from every place from Greenland down to Panama. So I've talked to eyewitnesses, done a lot of research through old newspaper articles and magazine articles, and I'd sure hope so, especially for my own personal enjoyment.
Well, I hope so too, in a sense, because I've always enjoyed the subject of cryptozoology. I think that the Loch Ness Monster was one of those formative influences, and maybe we'll talk a bit more about that at a later date. But before we get into that, I want to go back a little bit, because people will say that cryptozoology, it's something that just came about in the internet age, or the sort of mass paperback publications of the 70s when you had books about the Loch Ness Monster or whatever. But actually, it has a longer history than people imagine, right?
It really does. Cryptozoology is called cryptozoology, has only been around since probably the 1950s. I remember reading something about that once, but documenting animals that aren't readily known to science or to general knowledge has been around for thousands of years. Looking back in the mythologies of the Greeks, of the Babylonians, Egyptians, going back through all of these civilizations, they have had what we would consider monsters. They considered animals. There have been plenty of tomes written. I'd hate to call something 2,000 years old a book, but written about all sorts of monsters that the people back then were sure were actual real creatures. Some of those have been proven to be real creatures. Others, like the satyr, have not. But if I can bring the Bible into that really quick, it discussed the satyr. It mentions unicorns 8 times. And of course, we have beasts like the behemoth and the Leviathan. But most ancient books have stories of monsters.
Okay, I take that, and but there's a sort of a 21st century mindset which would say that people in the past, they didn't understand the world the way we do, and they were trying to make sense of the world, and they reached for the monster cookie jar rather than the science, hard science as we have today. But what you're seeming to suggest, that your research, which is right up to date, right in our century, seems to suggest that maybe there's more out there than meets the eye.
I believe honestly that there is. This planet of ours, especially the ocean, but even the land, we'd like to think. Here in the United States is big. but we like to think that all of it has been conquered
Yeah.
by man. And there are places in the United States and in Canada that people haven't trod for hundreds and hundreds of years, thick with forests, with mountains, out in deserts. What could be out there in places that we don't go? I mean, it could be anything. And every once in a while, uh, a person will stumble upon a creature and they'll see it briefly and not know what it is, or the creature might wander into our, into our viewpoint because we keep encroaching on nature. So I do think that there are creatures out there we haven't seen. One of the things that really annoys me is when people uh, discount the indigenous people's stories. Uh, the stories of Native Americans and the First Nations people across the continent of North America, they discuss big hairy beings that we now call Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and they interacted with them. They also discuss small people from 2 to 3 feet tall. On the East Coast, they're called Puckwudgies. There are a lot of different types of these little people, but the funny thing is, even though we ignore it, these little people and big people have been reported on every single continent by every civilization that we have any record for whatsoever. Who's to say that they're all wrong?
No, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you're talking about those little people in the United States, and obviously in Ireland, there's leprechauns, and then there's fairies and all sorts across Europe. However, and this is a question, Mark, really for you. You're a researcher in this field, okay? You're somebody who's spent a lot of time, I would say, field experience, as we say, out there investigating, talking to people. There must come a point, though, where you have to differentiate between what's folklore and what could be something which is existing, something which is scientifically provable. Is that part of your sort of modus operandi in your research to differentiate between what is just a good story and something which is a little bit more interesting?
Right. I do love a good story, and I love telling a good story. But I also approach everything in the paranormal field because I've covered all aspects of the paranormal. I always go in it with a scientific mind, a mind view. I don't just blindly accept something. I look rationally at what something could be. Bigfoot, for example, I mentioned that Bigfoot has been seen all around the world, and it has from all across North America, Central America, South America, Europe, all through Asia, Africa, and in Australia, have all had stories of Bigfoot. Okay, and something has got to be there. Something's got to be true about it because these stories came about when we weren't as connected as we were. Back in the early days when we didn't cross the oceans, or at least cross them very often, the stories didn't just transfer from place to place. They came from somewhere. And I like to mention Bigfoot because that one makes sense to me. Mammal, solidarity, I'm good with that. Um, it's very, very human-like. There's been speculation that it could be an extant Gigantopithecus. Uh, I, you know, it's proving something, one unknown with another, which I don't like. Uh, but could it be an offshoot of us? Could it be a human that, one of our ancestors? I think that's much more likely.
Well, let's challenge some of the skeptics that are watching this, okay? There'll be people watching it who think cryptozoology, it's a good laugh, it's something to amuse, it's a good tale, as you say, a tall tale, but there's no substance to it. So if you met that person, say you were on a flight across that Atlantic Ocean, and you met somebody and they said cryptozoology, give us, for example, one, two, three of the best case scenarios that you've come across in North America that really make you think?
Well, not necessarily. If I can go outside North America with this, um, this has just been in the last 7, 8 years a creature that was called the Corsican cat fox, and it was
Hmm.
a zoological creature that had been talked about on the island of Corsica for as long as people have been there, and people have never found this. Well, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, something like that, one of these beasts was caught trying to raid a chicken coop. And it was a species of feral cat that was unknown to science. They found out, hey, this is the Corsican, cat fox. Back in 1996, there was a discovery in the Congo, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in the Billy Forest. Um, the locals there had talked for centuries about this gigantic chimpanzee that walked on two legs like a man, slept on the ground in a nest like a gorilla, howled at the moon, and killed leopards and lions and ate them. All right, that was fanciful. The Western science didn't believe that. These people are uneducated. They don't know what science is until they went out into the Billy Forest and they found this species of chimpanzee that was taller than the regular than any chimps or bonobos. It slept on the ground in nests like gorillas. It howled at the moon, and it killed large cats for food. Those were proven right. The big one here is in the 1930s when a fisherman off of the coast of South Africa caught a fish that he didn't recognize, and he called a museum, and the museum director, I don't remember what her name is off the top, but this was the 1930s. She's not going to be offended that I don't remember, but she went and saw the fish, and it was a coelacanth. And according to science, the coelacanth had been dead for 65 million years. But no, here was a breeding population of living fossils off the coast of South Africa. Since then, there's been another population discovered in Indonesia. But these are three firm, proven examples of an animal unknown or unbelieved or believed to be extinct that were still alive. And that's what I would talk to a skeptic. That's what I'd hit a skeptic with.
Yeah, I mean, I think the examples you give, Jason, are excellent. I mean, and they're all, scientifically documented, and also their sort of absence, either absence in terms of time or their absence from the scientific record, makes the discoveries all the more interesting. But it leads nicely into our discussion because it's basically saying, unless I'm wrong, Jason, that there's more out there than we actually know, as you've alluded to, which leads us back to some of these cryptids that are running around North America. I mean, Sasquatch or Bigfoot is the probably the preeminent out there in terms of provability, though. We have the film from the 1960s, which a lot of people don't think proves anything. I don't know what your view is on it, but would you say that the whole case of Bigfoot, which has become a kind of cultural commodity, it's used for all sorts of fun and games. Do you think there's a real strong case that such creatures do exist in the North American continent?
If okay, I can't say definitively yes or no, something exists or something doesn't exist.
Mhm.
If I were a betting man, I would lay money that we're gonna discover Bigfoot at some point. There have been so many eyewitness accounts. There have been one of the big ones is the footprints. Sure, there were footprints that were obviously faked. The ones that Mr. Wallace in the 1950s in Northern California faked were that's the biggest example. But there are ones that have dermal ridges on them
Mhm.
that have been, you know, shown to experts, and they're like, okay, this is some kind of primate, some primate footprint. Somebody's not going to be able to fake that. Um, I mean, and if they do, I mean, it's going to be extremely hard to do. So from that, from evidence like the Skookum cast that shows a butt print and I think a shin print with definite muscles on it. Um, those are real solid pieces of evidence. One of the pieces of evidence, though, that people say, well, this proves Sasquatch doesn't exist, are hair samples or blood samples, scat samples, because invariably these come back as human, but with some, anomalies. Uh, in the Dr. Melba Ketchum had and she'd had some of this DNA material and had it analyzed, and that's what they came up with. There was a Bigfoot researcher in Canada who had some hair samples. It was analyzed, and the DNA was human with some anomalies. There was a British scientist who was able to have the son of Zana, who was an Alma, a Russian Bigfoot, uh, have his body dug up, and it was found to be human with some anomalies. What this tells me is Bigfoot might exist, but it might be human-ish. The anomalies might be its giant stature. The anomalies might be the fact that it's covered in hair. But going back to the Native Americans and First Nations people of the United States and Canada, overwhelmingly, their traditions have that they dealt with other tribes of large, hairy people. They didn't consider them animals, they were just other tribes of people. So, this DNA evidence, if it is in fact from a Sasquatch, tells me they're the type of people that we don't want to have over for family dinner, but they're still relatives.
But you're also alluding to something which is always in the mix with cryptozoology, and I know this from Loch Ness, which is you get people who, through for their own amusement or their own devilment, they fabricate something. Which can often hit the press and or did in the day, and it sort of clouds the issue when people realize that these are fraudsters, that people are hoaxing them. You must have come across, I mean, and this surely clouds the whole world of cryptozoology, where you have the fraudsters, the hoaxers, and also maybe the true believers who want to believe it so much that they'll do anything to ensure that it happens.
Right? Yes, the surgeon's photo from 1934 of the Loch Ness Monster, uh, it wasn't proven to be a fake until the 70s. And man, that was a big disappointment. There was the guy's name is Tom Biscardi, a alleged Bigfoot researcher in the United States who pulled a surgeon's photo. He claimed that he met someone who shot a Bigfoot and was keeping it at home in his freezer in the state of Georgia. And when it was announced, I got excited a little bit because I figured it was probably faked. And by the time the press was finished with it, it was a gorilla costume filled with pig intestines.
Yeah.
So yes, things like this, the hoaxsters make us look bad to the world. Okay, it makes me look a little bit nuts to say Bigfoot probably exists. If people are out there pulling hoaxes, but there's enough solid evidence out there if the press would do its job that I think more people would be convinced. And I hate to attack the press because I was a newspaper journalist for 17 years. I teach journalism at a university. I love the press. I am a member of the press, but they don't handle paranormal topics very, very well. I offer a class every 4 or 5 years called Paranormal Journalism, where I teach young students, college students, how to cover these topics without poking fun of them.
I wonder, Jason, if it's the title, paranormal journal. I mean, it's really journalism about things that are not yet known, perhaps, or misunderstood. I mean, The trouble is, as you and I know, that in the world of journalism, this type of topic fills or used to fill the Sunday papers. When there was no other news, in the UK there was an expression called the silly season, and you could almost bet money that there would be a Loch Ness monster story at some point, which only added to the idea that it was all really just sort of fun and games. Um, but talk to me a little bit about some of the other cryptids across North America. I mean, in your researches, did you come across the New Jersey Devil?
Right, the Jersey Devil in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, which there are a lot of abandoned settlements. There's abandoned homes there because when it was settled back in the 1700s, people wanted to farm, but the ground is way too acidic, so the farms and the communities all failed. But one of the people or one of the families that lived there was the Leeds family, Leeds, and the mother was pregnant for the 13th time, and she was giving birth. And again, this was in the early 1700s. She was giving birth, and the midwife was helping her, and she screamed, "Let the devil take this one," because it was the 13th. And when it came out, it was a normal male child until it swiftly mutated into a horse-headed, goat-hooved, bat-winged monster that killed the midwife and flew out the chimney. And that's the Leeds Devil, the New Jersey Devil. There are variations to that story, but there are reports over the years of people seeing it. Firefighters in nearby Philadelphia uh, attacked it with a water hose because it was fluttering around the tops of buildings. Napoleon Bonaparte's brother, who lived in the United States by that time, reported seeing the Jersey Devil. So there are plenty of reports, but that's one of the more fanciful ones.
You think? What about the phenomena of dogmen? Are you familiar with this? They seem to pop up all over the place. We've had some here in Europe. People saying they're sort of a hybrid of human beings and dogs or something.
Right. I mean, that's sort of the excuse that's given to dogmen and some of the other monsters like the chupacabra are the United States government has experimented with making super soldiers and they've mixed DNA and that's to me fanciful. But on the other hand, I've interviewed people. One person who's a friend of mine who I trust who told me of encountering a dog man in Missouri. He was traveling on a dirt road in absolutely the middle of nowhere, and it was about 10 o'clock at night. And at the bottom of this hill, there was a big dog in the middle of the road eating something, and he had the windows down. He could smell a wet dog smell, and the dog didn't move, so he honked the horn. The dog looked at him. Its eyes were yellow. They were glowing, he said. And then it stood up on two legs and walked off the road. Um, that would, yeah, that would keep me out of the trees for a long time. But what is it? I would doubt that it is um, some kind of natural animal because we would have some sort of fossil evidence, I think, to show. Uh, so I don't know. I mean, I'd hate to think that werewolf stories are true, but again, we don't know.
Well, I was going to say there's a sort of a correlation, if you like, between the werewolf legends and dogmen. You know, there's similarities in description, and these are stories which go back again centuries upon to the beginnings of recorded storytelling. They're telling
King
stories.
Lycos from in England or in Greece, King Lycos tricked Zeus at a dinner by not Zeus. It would have been no, it would have been Zeus. Sorry, tricked him by trying to feed him human flesh because he was mad at the god, and to pay him back, he turned the king into a wolf man.
Mhm.
That's one of the earliest stories. But I mean, those stories, of course, stretch through the history of Europe, and as a matter of fact, those type of beings are also all over the planet. You've got were jaguars from from South America, and were leopards from Africa, were dolphins, were sharks, all these different different cultures have the same type of story of humans being able to turn into different animals. And yeah, the where dolphins are awfully naughty, so I'd stay away from those.
Now, your particular interest has been Missouri. What would you say is the kind of cause célèbre for cryptozoology in your state?
There were there were a couple, but I think the biggest one would have to be Momo, the Missouri Monster. Back in the early 1970s, there were reports from a small town, Louisiana, Missouri, which is just south of Hannibal, which was the home of Mark Twain, the celebrated Missouri author.
Mm.
Um, what happened was a girl was she was 16 years old. She's still alive, frankly. I heard an interview with her a couple of years ago, but she was doing dishes in the kitchen, and her two younger brothers were outside playing, and they lived right next to the trees, right next to a spot of woods on the edge of town. And she panicked because she saw a huge hulking figure covered in hair, no neck, about 7 feet tall, staring at her brothers from the tree line. And she screamed at them to get in the house, and they did. Um, they didn't notice it, but they did notice an awful smell, which also, comes from Bigfoot encounters. Uh, People for the next 2 weeks saw this creature. Uh, it came to that house again, left footprints in the garden, which they made plaster casts of. Um, a person couldn't find his dog. That same night, somebody reported seeing this hairy monster carrying a dead dog in its arms. I think one of the scariest encounters were two high school girls went to a park by the Missouri River or the Mississippi River, and they were having a picnic, and all of a sudden they smelled some skunk smell, and they looked, and there was this monster staring at them, and they screamed and ran back to their car and locked the doors, but they left the keys on the picnic blanket. And
Mm.
the monster came up and pressed its face into the glass, and they honked and honked and honked until it finally ran away, and they were able to retrieve their keys and leave. But this terrorized a small town for 2 weeks. And even though I was a young boy, I was still a newspaper nerd, and I read stories about this Bigfoot monster in a newspaper, so it had to be real, right?
What was the coverage like, Jason? I mean, was it straight down the line, or was it sort of discounting the?
It was at that point, because that was just a few years after the Patterson-Gimlin film that you alluded to from '67. Bigfoot hadn't become the big joke yet, and it
Right.
wasn't until I think uh, the folk monster, was made into a national story that people started poking fun at Bigfoot.
Yeah. So I think that was in the 80s. Well, there was all sorts of films where Bigfoot became
Yeah, in from
family
the
and
'70s up till the early '80s, there were a lot of campy B movies about Bigfoot.
yeah. So people were genuinely terrified by this creature that was out there.
Right. Well, I mean, because we had small town people doing these interviews, and they were obviously terrified.
Yeah. And obviously honest as well. This is prior to internet, TikTok, and all the rest. People often just said the truth to the camera the minute it was put in front of them, right?
Well, exactly. And again, people had heard of the abominable snowman.
Mhm.
In fact, I think that there was a movie in the '50s called The Abominable Snowman, starring Peter Cushing and Forrest Tucker, I think. It was
Mhm.
actually a well done movie if you guys haven't seen it. Um, but I mean, so that was well known, uh, but Bigfoot wasn't very well known yet. There were, some stories from the couple stories from the '50s and then the Patterson-Gimlin, but it didn't really kick off until after '73, '74, '75, something like that. So a lot of people didn't know what a Bigfoot was.
What do you make of that film from '67? What's your take on it?
I've gone back and forth over the years. I remember as a child watching In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, and they showed that film, and I'm like, this is proof. This is it. And I've gone back and forth thinking that it kind of looks fake, but then again, looking at it, I don't know if I'm wanting it to be real, but I think I see muscle definition. Why would somebody in 1967 make, or why would a couple of guys in 1967 make a Bigfoot costume with breasts? That's a big question in my mind. I don't think they would. So that kind of leads me to believe that it very well could be something real.
Which leads us back a little bit to, and you alluded to it there, that people, and you must come across this in your researches, Jason. There's, as I say, the true believers, people who want to believe in this, even if sometimes the evidence is as flimsy. What do you think lies behind that? Why do you think people are so fascinated by these creatures, pseudo creatures? We're not quite sure what they are. Why do you think people are so fascinated by them?
Because of the fact that it's unknown, it's a little frightening. There is a chance you might see one. Um, H.P. Lovecraft, the famed horror writer, I'm just paraphrasing because I can't remember, but he said the oldest, most primal fear is fear of the unknown, and that's kind of exciting, isn't it? You know, thinking that there might be some sort of monster living under the, in the peat filled waters of Loch Ness. That sounds great. Something might be in the forest if you walk through there, and you might see something most other people have never seen. It gives kind of a rush. But the true believers in anything, whether it be um, flat Earth or Bigfoot or any type of religion. All those people kind of scare me if they're looking at something and believe it without any proof. Um, all of the monsters that I think might actually have a chance of surviving or of living, uh, there's some proof out there that they might. I went over some with Bigfoot. Um, there were some monsters I wrote about in Chasing American Monsters, and I pointed this out that there are these huge lake monsters, but they were in reservoirs, man-made reservoirs, that were made in the 30s or 40s. I mean, that's not going to happen. So when something sounds ridiculous, I do point it out. But um, true believers, they really need to read more. Uh,
There, there's also something, though, in what you're alluding to there, for example, about the reservoirs and creatures, because there's lots of urban myths about these type of creatures, and sometimes they have a grain of truth. So, for example, I'm sure you're familiar with the ideas that there's alligators in the New York sewers and probably something similar in the London sewers. And, there is a semblance of possibility there that somebody released something down there and so on and so forth. But it's sort of adding two and two and coming up with 22, if you know what I mean. I mean, do you find that in your researches, Jason, that it's not so much, it's kind of a wish fulfillment that it just couldn't be something that has escaped or something which is from the animal kingdom, but a bit unusual. It has to be something which is fabulous, a creature which we have never yet discovered.
right. And the big example I'm gonna say, and I hope this doesn't get people worked up, but the chupacabra, because
Just tell people what that is or what it purports to be.
okay, chupacabra, those two words in Spanish mean goat sucker. Back in, I think it was the 90s. Yes, it was the 90s. There were a lot of, in Puerto Rico, there were people reporting that they were finding goats, rabbits, sheep, their pets, uh, that had puncture marks on their body and they were drained of blood. All right, that's awful. I'm sorry you lost your goat, but the people then started reporting seeing an animal associated with it. It was maybe 3 feet tall, had spikes on its back, red eyes, it had fangs, it had claws. In some cases, it had wings. And the first reported case of it was in, I think, 96 in Puerto Rico in a city. A woman saw this and a couple other people also reported seeing this beast. And I read the first interview with her, and it was also right after the movie Species was released in Puerto Rico. And that's a science fiction movie where an alien with, that type of eyes, those type of fangs, spikes down her back, uh, feeds off the blood of people. So in that case, is that a case of hysteria? Maybe. Are there animals that will bite other animals? Of course there are. If animals have been dead for a bit, will their blood drain? Can happen. So when it comes to the chupacabra, that's one of those. That's the best example I can think of.
Jason, you've alluded to a lot of people seeing things in North America, and but you've also alluded to the fact that this is a worldwide phenomena. Again, just give us, you've given us three very good examples of cryptozoology down through the ages. Of course, is there any sort of other case studies, either on the plus or the negative, which give you an example again of either people believing too much or believing too little?
Well, one of the cryptids that doesn't get a lot of belief, and I totally understand that, is the dragon. Dragons, in the Midwest, the Native Americans had the piasa, which its description is a dragon. Europe had dragons. Australia has dragons. Of course, we've got the dragons from Southeast Asia, which are popular. Quetzalcoatl from the Aztecs and the Mayans is a flying, talking dragon. These are again worldwide. People who didn't have connection, at the time, made these stories that are so similar. Is there something that ties them together? I'm not sure. I find it a little hard to believe that there's a giant physics defying flying reptile out there, but there have been big reptiles. During the Pleistocene, there were big everything. The Komodo dragon is another one, the largest monitor lizard on the planet. We much like the panda, the giant panda, the mountain gorilla, the megamouth shark, other animals like that. Westerners didn't believe in the Komodo dragon. It sounded way too fanciful because it could kill something just with one bite. And then we saw it. The Westerners saw them and realized there is this monster, and its mouth is so full, not just of needle teeth, huge needle teeth, but with bacteria that if it bites something and lets go of it, that creature's going to die in an hour or two. So, yeah, I listen to the locals, folks. They know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, Jason, no pun intended, you've given us lots to get our teeth into around cryptoids and such like. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again about this. It's a fascinating subject, which I think is too easily ridiculed. But as you've already suggested, there are numerous examples where science has been proved wrong. And certain things do actually exist. And folklore, if you could say, has been proved right. Tell people, Jason, where they can find out more about you and your work in this field.
I am on a lot of the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, I'm sorry, X, uh, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky. My website is just my name, jasonoffutt.com. And all my books are available there or at Amazon. Like you said, I'm not just a person who's interested in cryptozoology. I'm also a novelist, so there's some fun stuff there. And if anybody's got any questions, I've contact information out there. Don't hesitate to get a hold of me.
That's extremely generous. Jason, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation.
All right, I said it was going to be fun. You know what? We did have fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. we're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.